The silence in the private dining room wasn't just awkward, it was expensive. $5 billion hung in the balance, suspended by a thread that had just snapped. Arthur Sterling, the CEO of Sterling Tech, watched the blood drain from his translator's face. The man had frozen. Across the table, Chairman Wei, the most powerful industrialist in Asia, stood up, buttoning his suit jacket with a look of utter coldness. The deal was dead. Arthur's empire was seconds away from collapse. But then, the sound of pouring water broke the tension. A waitress, invisible until that moment, placed a fresh glass down and spoke. She didn't speak English. She spoke flawless, high dialect Mandarin. And what she said didn't just save the meeting, it terrified the CEO. Who was she? And why was a woman with the skills to run a nation clearing tables at a steakhouse? Arthur Sterling adjusted his cufflinks, but his hands were shaking. It was a tremor so slight that only he could feel it, vibrating against the cold gold of his watch. He was sitting in the Onyx Room of L'Horizon, New York City's most exclusive restaurant. The walls were lined with dark velvet, and the view outside showcased the Manhattan skyline, a glittering reminder of everything Arthur was about to lose if tonight went wrong. Arthur was 32, a prodigy in the tech world, known for his aggressive acquisitions and brilliant mind. But Sterling Tech was bleeding, a hidden debt crisis fueled by a betrayal from his former partner, Marcus Thorne, had left the company hollowed out. Arthur needed a miracle. He needed Chairman Wei. Wei was the head of the Dragonfly Group, a conglomerate that controlled the microchip supply for half the globe. A partnership with Wei meant survival. A rejection meant bankruptcy, humiliation, and the end of the Sterling legacy. "Where is he?" Arthur hissed, leaning toward his assistant, David. "You said the translator was the best in the city." David, a young man who looked like he hadn't slept in a week, wiped sweat from his forehead. "He is, sir." Jonathan Reed. He lived in Beijing for 10 years. He's running 5 minutes late. Traffic on Fifth Avenue. Arthur clenched his jaw. Chairman Wei does not tolerate lateness. He values time more than money. As if on cue, the double oak doors opened. The maître d' bowed low, ushering in a small group of men. In the center walked Chairman Wei. He was an older man, perhaps 60, with silver hair swept back and eyes that seemed to analyze every flaw in the room instantly. He didn't look like a businessman. He looked like a warlord wearing an Italian suit. Arthur stood up immediately, buttoning his jacket. He forced a confident smile, extending a hand. "Chairman Wei," Arthur said. "It is an honor." Wei looked at Arthur's hand, but didn't take it immediately. He said something in rapid, low Mandarin to his own assistant, a stern-faced woman holding a tablet. Arthur froze. He looked at the door. No translator. Jonathan Reed was not there. The silence stretched. It was agonizing. Arthur's hand was still extended, hovering in the air like a desperate plea. Finally, Wei took his hand, gave it a brief, limp shake, and sat down without a word. The atmosphere was glacial. "David," Arthur whispered through gritted teeth as they sat. "Get Reed on the phone, now." "I'm trying, sir," David whispered back, panic rising in his voice. A waitress approached the table. She was young, perhaps 25, with chestnut hair pulled back into a severe bun that couldn't quite hide the natural wave of her hair. Her name tag read Eleanor. She moved with a quiet efficiency, placing water glasses and menus with precise, fluid motions. She kept her eyes down, adhering to the strict protocol of L'Horizon. Be present, but be invisible. Arthur didn't even look at her. He was too busy staring at Wei, who was speaking to his assistant again, looking displeased. "Mr. Sterling," Wei's assistant said in heavily accented English. The chairman asks, "Why we wait?" "My apologies," Arthur said, his charm offensive, kicking into high gear. "My translator is just detained. He will be here momentarily. Please let us order some wine while we wait. L'Horizon has the finest cellar in the city." Wei looked at Arthur, his face unreadable. He tapped his fingers on the table. Tap, tap, tap. It sounded like a countdown. 10 minutes passed. They were the longest 10 minutes of Arthur's life. The appetizers arrived, delicate scallops with truffle foam. Elena placed them down gently. Then the doors burst open. Jonathan Reed arrived. He was disheveled, his tie crooked, breathing hard. "Mr. Sterling, I am so sorry," Reed gasped, rushing to the table. "There was an accident. The bridge." "Sit down," Arthur commanded, his voice ice cold. "Fix this." Reed sat. He wiped his face with a handkerchief and turned to Chairman Wei, offering a shaky apology in Mandarin. Wei's eyes narrowed. He said something back, sharp and fast. Reed blinked. He looked confused. "The chairman says he is hungry." Arthur frowned. "He has food in front of him. That's not what he said. Ask him about the merger proposal." Reed turned back to Wei and spoke again. This time Wei laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was a dry, mocking sound. Wei leaned forward and unleashed a paragraph of complex, technical Mandarin, using idioms and business terminology that dated back to the classical era. Reed's face went pale. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. "Translate," Arthur demanded. "He's talking about a tiger?" Reed stammered. "Something about a tiger and a mountain?" "Sir, his dialect. It's extremely specific. It's a regional dialect mixed with archaic business phrasing. I'm struggling to catch the nuance." Arthur felt his stomach drop. "You said you were the best." "I am. For standard Mandarin." "But this..." Wei slammed his hand on the table. The silverware rattled. He stood up, shouting something that required no translation. He was insulted. He gestured to his assistant, who immediately began packing their documents. "No! No, please!" Arthur stood up, desperate. "Tell him to wait. Tell him we can renegotiate the terms." Reed stammered something in broken Chinese. Wei stopped. He looked at Arthur with pure disdain. He spoke one final sentence in English, the only words he had said directly to Arthur all night. "You waste my time. You bring boy to do man's job. Sterling Tech is finished." Wei turned to leave. Arthur stood there, his vision blurring. This was it. The bankruptcy filings were already drafted on his laptop back at the office. Marcus Thorne would buy the scraps of his company for pennies. His father's legacy, destroyed because of traffic and a bad translator. The room was silent, save for the soft clink of a water pitcher. Elena, the waitress, had stepped forward to refill the chairman's glass before he left. It was a standard service move, but the timing was terrible. Wei brushed past her, almost knocking the pitcher from her hand. And then it happened. Elena didn't drop the pitcher. She caught it, steadied herself, and looked directly at Chairman Wei's back. "The tiger does not leave the mountain because the wind blows, Chairman Wei," she said. Her voice was soft, but it carried a steeliness that cut through the room. And she didn't say it in English. She said it in Mandarin. Not the textbook Mandarin Reed had been butchering. She spoke with the precise, rolling accent of the Zhejiang province, Wei's home region, laced with the formal, archaic tone he had just used. Chairman Wei froze. He stopped mid-step, his hand on the door handle. Arthur stared at the waitress. Reed's jaw dropped. Slowly, Chairman Wei turned around. The anger in his eyes was replaced by shock. He looked at the woman in the stained apron, the one he had ignored for an hour. "Who spoke?" Wei asked in Mandarin. Elena lowered her head respectfully, but when she raised her eyes, they were clear and unafraid. "I did, Chairman," she replied in the same flawless dialect. "The wind is merely noise. A wise tiger listens for the heartbeat of the earth beneath it. Mr. Sterling is not the wind. He is the rock. You just haven't looked low enough to see his foundation." Wei stared at her. The silence this time wasn't awkward. It was electric. Arthur Sterling felt as though the floor had tilted beneath his feet. He looked at Eleanor. He had seen her before, surely. She had served him coffee a dozen times over the last 6 months he frequented L'Horizon. He knew she was quiet. He knew she was efficient. He knew she had a small scar above her left eyebrow. But he had never seen her. Not really. To him, she was part of the machinery of the restaurant, like the linen napkins or the silver forks. Now, she was the only person in the room who mattered. Chairman Wei took a slow step back toward the table. He ignored Arthur entirely and focused his hawk-like gaze on Eleanor. "You speak the dialect of Hangzhou," Wei said, his voice lowering, testing her. "But your accent, it has the dust of the north. Who are you?" Eleanor kept her posture perfect, hands clasped behind her back, the picture of a subservient server, yet her words commanded the room. "I am just a waitress, sir," she replied in Mandarin. "But my ears are open. You mentioned the scholars of the bamboo grove in your earlier reference regarding the merger. Mr. Reed here." She glanced briefly, pityingly, at the sweating translator. "Mistook the metaphor for a literal discussion about forestry." Wei's lips twitched. It was almost a smile. "He is a fool," Wei stated bluntly. "Perhaps," Elena agreed smoothly. "But Mr. Sterling is not. He hired a tool that failed him. That is a mistake of logistics, not of character. You are a man who values the outcome, not the process. If the bridge breaks, do you blame the river, or do you simply build a boat? Mr. Sterling is ready to build the boat." Arthur didn't understand a word, but he understood the body language. Wei was listening. He was engaged. "What is she saying?" Arthur whispered frantically to David. "I don't know, sir," David whispered back, eyes wide. "But look at Wei." Wei laughed, a genuine, loud laugh that echoed off the velvet walls. He walked back to his chair and sat down. He pointed a finger at Elena. "Sit," Wei commanded. Elena hesitated. She glanced at the maître d', Henri, who was hovering by the door looking terrified that his staff was interrupting a VIP dinner. "Sit," Wei barked again. "You translate. You speak for him." Elena looked at Arthur. Her eyes were hazel, flecked with green, and for the first time, Arthur saw a profound weariness in them, hidden deep behind the professional mask. "Mr. Sterling," Elena said in English, her voice shifting to a cool, professional American accent. "The chairman wishes for me to facilitate the rest of this meeting. With your permission." Arthur felt a surge of adrenaline mixed with confusion. "You? You're a waitress? Do you know anything about semiconductor logistics or international trade law?" Elena's expression didn't change. "I know that if you don't say yes in the next 5 seconds, he walks out that door and Sterling tech files for Chapter 11 by morning. Yes or no, sir?" Arthur blinked. The bluntness hit him like a physical blow. She knew about his financial situation? How? "Yes," Arthur breathed. "Do it." Elena nodded. She untied her apron, folded it neatly, and placed it on the back of an empty chair. She sat down opposite Chairman Wei. The transformation was instant. The submissive posture vanished. She sat with the spine of a queen. For the next 2 hours, Arthur witnessed a miracle. Elena didn't just translate, she negotiated. When Arthur proposed a 15% equity split, and Wei countered with an angry refusal, Elena didn't translate the anger. She turned to Arthur and said, "He feels the risk assessment is too high on his side. Offer him a seat on the board and lower the equity to 12%, but keep the voting rights." "Are you crazy?" Arthur whispered. "I can't give him a board seat." "If you don't," Elena said calmly, "he enters a partnership with Marcus Thorne tomorrow. Thorne has been courting him for months. Way respects power sharing, not just profit sharing. Give him the seat." Arthur stared at her. "How do you know about Thorne?" "I read the papers, Mr. Sterling, and I listen to the people who eat here. Marcus Thorne dined at table 4 last night. He was very loud." Arthur felt a chill. Thorne was moving faster than he thought. He looked at Way, who was waiting. "Fine," Arthur said. "Board seat, 12%. Elena turned to Way and spoke. Her tone was respectful, but firm. She used her hands to emphasize points, mirroring Way's own mannerisms. By the time the dessert arrived, a chocolate soufflé that no one touched, the deal was done. The contracts were redrafted on the spot by Way's assistant and David. Chairman Way signed the papers with a gold fountain pen. He stood up and bowed to Arthur, a sign of deep respect. Then he turned to Elena. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card made of heavy, cream-colored cardstock with gold embossing. He placed it on the table in front of her. "You are wasted here, child," Wei said in Mandarin. "If you ever tire of serving food to men who do not see you, call me. Shanghai would welcome you." "I am content where I am, Chairman," Elena replied softly. Wei shook his head, chuckled, and walked out of the room with his entourage. The door clicked shut. Arthur Sterling sat alone with Elena Vance. The silence returned, but this time it wasn't expensive. It was heavy with questions. Arthur looked at the signed contract. It was worth $4 billion instantly, and potentially $20 billion over the next decade. He was saved. He looked up at Eleanor. She was standing up, reaching for her apron. "Where are you going?" Arthur asked, his voice hoarse. "My shift isn't over, sir," Eleanor said, tying the apron back around her waist. "I have tables in the main dining room." "Stop," Arthur stood up. "You just saved my company. You just out-negotiated the toughest businessman in Asia. Who are you?" "I'm Elena," she said simply. "I'll bring the check." "I'm not letting you walk away to bus tables," Arthur said, stepping around the table to block her path. He was close to her now. He could smell her perfume. Something subtle, like vanilla and old paper. "You speak a dialect of Mandarin that even my professional translator didn't know. You know about my rivalry with Thorne. You understand corporate equity structures." Elena looked down. "I read a lot, Mr. Sterling." "Don't lie to me," Arthur said, his voice intense. "I need you." Elena's head snapped up. "You need a translator. You have one. Get him to take a class." "I don't need a translator," Arthur said. "I need you. I want you to work for me. Personally." Elena laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "I don't think that's a good idea." "Why? I'll triple whatever you make here. Quadruple it. Name your price." Elena looked at him, her gaze hardening. "Money isn't the problem, Arthur." He paused. She had used his first name. "Then what is?" "The problem," Elena said, her voice dropping to a whisper, "is that if I work for you, Marcus Thorne will find out who I am. And if he finds out who I am, your company won't just go bankrupt. It will burn to the ground." Arthur frowned. "Who are you?" Elena stepped back. "Someone who should have stayed invisible. Thank you for the generous tip. I'm sure you'll leave." She turned and walked out of the private room, leaving Arthur Sterling standing there with $1 billion contract in one hand and a mystery he couldn't solve in the other. He wasn't thinking about the money anymore. He was thinking about the fear in her eyes when she mentioned Marcus Thorne. The next morning, the headlines were euphoric. Sterling Tech secures historic China deal. Arthur Sterling, the comeback kid. The stock price jumped 40% before the market even opened. But Arthur wasn't celebrating. He was sitting in his corner office on the 50th floor, looking at a grainy security camera photo. His head of security, a burly ex-CIA agent named Mike, had placed on his desk. "Elena Vance," Mike said, crossing his arms. 26 years old, lives in a studio apartment in Queens, no criminal record, pays her taxes, boring as hell. "Dig deeper," Arthur said, staring at the photo. It was a shot of her entering her apartment building, wearing a heavy coat, looking over her shoulder. She speaks high-level Mandarin. She knows corporate law. And she's terrified of Marcus Thorne. Mike frowned. Thorne? The shark who tried to hostile take over us last year. The same. Why would a waitress be afraid of a billionaire hedge fund manager? Maybe she owes him money, Mike suggested. Gambling debts? "She doesn't strike me as a gambler," Arthur murmured. "She strikes me as a chess player." Arthur stood up. "Get the car. We're going to L'Horizon." "Sir, it's 10 a.m. They're closed for lunch prep." "I know," Arthur said. "I'm not going to eat." The kitchen of L'Horizon was a chaotic symphony of clattering pans and shouting chefs. Elena was in the back, polishing wine glasses. Her hands moved rhythmically, but her mind was miles away. She had made a mistake. She knew it. Stepping into the light last night had been a tactical error, but she couldn't watch Wei destroy Sterling. Sterling Tech was the only barrier left against Marcus Thorne's total monopoly of the tech sector. If Thorne won, he would have the power to bury the truth forever. The truth about what happened to her father. "Elena!" The floor manager, a nervous Frenchman named Pierre, came running in. "You have a visitor, in the main hall." Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. "Who is it?" "It is Mr. Sterling, the owner of the city, apparently." Elena closed her eyes. Stupid, stupid, stupid. She should have called in sick. She should have quit last night. She untied her apron and walked out into the dining room. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Arthur was standing by the hostess stand, wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than her father's legal defense fund. "You checked up on me," Elena said as she approached. It wasn't a question. Arthur turned. He looked tired but energized. "Good morning to you too, Elena." "And yes, I did. Elena Vance. Clean record. Queens resident. Except, Vance isn't your real name, is it?" Elena stopped walking. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I had my guys run facial recognition against university yearbooks," Arthur said, stepping closer. "It took all night, but we got a match. You're not Elena Vance. You're Elena Fairchild, daughter of Robert Fairchild." Elena felt the blood drain from her face. She gripped the back of a chair to steady herself. Robert Fairchild, the former CFO of Omnicorp, the man who had been accused of embezzling $50 million 5 years ago, the man who had committed suicide in his prison cell before he could prove his innocence. "My father didn't do it," Elena whispered. Her voice was trembling, but her eyes were blazing with sudden anger. "I know," Arthur said. His voice was surprisingly gentle. "I looked into the case files this morning. The evidence against him was circumstantial at best. It was fabricated. By Marcus Thorne." Elena spat the name out like poison. "Thorne was on the board of Omnicorp then. He needed a scapegoat for his own illegal trading. He pinned it on my father. He destroyed my family. They seized our assets. They blacklisted me from every university and corporation in the country. I was a doctoral candidate in international economics at Harvard, Arthur. I spoke 4 languages, and suddenly I couldn't get a job as a bank teller. Arthur stared at her. The pieces were falling into place. The brilliance, the fear, the hatred for Thorn. "So you hid," Arthur said. "I survived," Elena corrected. "I changed my name. I took jobs where no one looks at your face, only at your hands. I've been waiting, gathering information, trying to find the paper trail that proves Thorn framed him. And have you found it?" Elena looked away. "I'm close, but I don't have the access. I need access to the Omnicorp archived servers, but those are locked behind firewalls that only a CEO-level executive could breach." Arthur took a deep breath. He looked at this woman, this waitress who had lost everything and was still fighting a war against a titan. "I can get you that access," Arthur said. Elena looked up, stunned. "What?" "Sterling Tech just acquired the cloud storage firm that hosts Omnicorp's old archives. It was part of the deal you helped me save last night." Arthur extended his hand. "Come work for me, Elena. Not as a translator. As my chief strategy officer. We'll take down Thorn together. We'll clear your father's name." "Arthur," Elena warned, "if Thorn sees me at your side, he will come for you. He plays dirty. He has judges in his pocket. He has the media." "Let him come," Arthur said, a dangerous glint in his eye. "I have something he doesn't have." "What's that?" "I have the tiger on the mountain," Arthur smiled. Elena stared at his hand. It was a lifeline. It was dangerous. It was everything she had wanted for 5 years. She reached out and took his hand. "Okay," she said. "But first, you have to pay for the glass I'm about to break." "Deal." Elena took her Elena name tag off her blouse and threw it onto the floor. It cracked down the middle. The elevators at Sterling Tech were glass cylinders that shot up 50 stories in seconds, offering a vertigo-inducing view of the city. For Elena Fairchild, stepping into that elevator on Monday morning felt more dangerous than walking a tightrope. She wasn't wearing an apron anymore. She was wearing a tailored slate-grey suit that Arthur had insisted his personal stylist procure for her over the weekend. Her hair was down, cascading in soft waves, no longer restrained in a severe bun. She looked every inch the executive, but inside, her stomach was twisting into knots. "Breathe," Arthur said, standing next to her as the floor numbers blurred past. "You belong here." "I haven't set foot in a corporate office in 5 years, Arthur," Elena replied, her eyes fixed on the doors. "And the last time I did, I was escorted out by security while my colleagues watched." "This is different," Arthur said, his voice firm. "This is my building, and you are my chief strategy officer. Anyone who has a problem with that answers to me." The doors slid open with a soft chime. The 50th floor was a hive of activity. Glass walls, sleek white desks, and the hum of high-stakes commerce. As Arthur and Elena walked toward the conference room, heads turned. The whispers started immediately. "Who is that? Is that the waitress from the tabloids? I heard she's a spy." Arthur ignored them. He pushed open the doors to the main boardroom. The senior executive team was already seated. 12 men and women, the sharks of the tech industry, looked up. At the head of the table sat Sarah Jenkins, the VP of Operations. Sarah had been with Sterling Tech for 10 years. She was brilliant, ruthless, and she had expected the Chief Strategy Officer role to be hers. Her eyes narrowed as she saw Elena. "Good morning, everyone," Arthur said, taking his seat at the head of the table. He gestured to the empty chair at his right hand, the seat of power. "I'd like to introduce Elena Fairchild. She is our new CSO, effective immediately." Silence. Thick, heavy silence. Sarah Jenkins leaned back, tapping a silver pen against her notepad. Fairchild, as in Robert Fairchild, the embezzler. A collective gasp went around the room. Elena didn't flinch. She remained standing, her hands resting lightly on the back of her chair. She looked directly at Sarah. As in Robert Fairchild, the former CFO of Omnicorp who was wrongfully accused, Elena said, her voice calm but projecting to every corner of the room. And yes, I am his daughter. Does that pose a conflict for our logistics update, Sarah? Sarah scoffed. Arthur, this is a joke, right? You bring a woman with a tainted name and zero experience in the last half-decade into this room? We are in the middle of integrating the Dragonfly merger. We don't have time for charity cases. It's not charity, Arthur said, his voice dropping an octave. It's strategy. It's reckless, Sarah snapped. What does she know about our supply chain bottlenecks in Shenzhen? What does she know about the liquidity crisis we're facing in the third quarter? Elena didn't wait for Arthur to defend her. She walked over to the smart board at the front of the room. She picked up a digital stylus. The liquidity crisis in Q3 is a myth, Elena said, writing a number on the board. $450 million. You're projecting a deficit because you're calculating the Dragonfly chip integration using standard shipping lanes. But Chairman Wei doesn't use standard lanes. He owns a controlling stake in the Red Star rail line through Central Asia. She drew a line across the map on the screen. If we route the supply chain through the rail line instead of the Pacific shipping route, Elena continued, writing rapidly, we cut transit time by 14 days. That reduces inventory holding costs by 18%. That turns your Q3 deficit into a $120 million surplus. She turned around and capped the stylus. The room was dead silent. Sarah Jenkins's mouth was slightly open. I read the merger documents, Sarah, Elena said softly. All 4,000 pages. Did you? Arthur smiled. It was a small, dangerous smile. Any other questions for Ms. Fairchild? No one spoke. Good, Arthur said. Now, let's get to work. For the next week, Elena threw herself into the work. She was first in the office at 5 a.m. and the last to leave at midnight. She was brilliant, efficient, and terrifyingly competent. The staff quickly learned that the Waitress moniker was a mistake. She was a machine. But the real work happened after hours. Late one Tuesday night, Arthur and Eleanor sat in his office, illuminated only by the glow of multiple monitors. The city lights of New York twinkled below them like diamonds. We're in, Arthur said, typing a command sequence. The Dragonfly acquisition gave us backdoor administrative rights to the server farm that hosts the old Omnicorp archives. If the evidence of Thorne's frame-up exists, it's in here. Elena leaned in, her heart racing. Search for Project Acheron. That was the code name my father mentioned in his letters from prison. He said it was the project Thorne was using to siphon funds. Arthur typed it in. The progress bar spun. Access denied. Damn, Arthur muttered. It's encrypted, AES 256-bit, and it's biometrically locked. Biometrically? Elena asked. It requires a retinal scan or a fingerprint from a verified administrator to decrypt the file. Even with admin rights, we can't open it without the physical key. Who are the administrators? Arthur pulled up a list. There were 3. Your father. But his access was revoked. The former CEO who is dead. And Marcus Thorne. Eleanor slumped back in her chair. So we're at a dead end. We need Thorne's fingerprint or his eye to open the file that proves he's a criminal. It's impossible. Arthur stared at the screen. Then he turned to look at Eleanor. The blue light of the monitor reflected in his eyes. Not impossible, Arthur said. Just risky. What are you thinking? The Met Gala is this Saturday, Arthur said. Thorn is a co-chair. He'll be there, and he loves to drink scotch. Eleanor realized what he was suggesting. You want to lift his fingerprints at the most public event of the year? I have a contact in tech development, Arthur said. They made a prototype film, a synthetic skin layer. If we can get him to hold a glass, and then I can swipe that glass. He knows you, Arthur. Elena shook her head. He won't drink with you. He hates you. He hates me, Arthur agreed. But he doesn't know you. Not really. He knows the name Elena Fairchild, but he hasn't seen you since you were 21. You look different. You carry yourself differently. He'll recognize me, Elena whispered. He has eyes like a hawk. Not if you're hiding in plain sight, Arthur said. He stood up and walked to the window. We go together. As a couple. A power couple. If we control the narrative, if we are the center of attention, he won't be looking for a ghost from his past. He'll be looking at my new girlfriend. Elena felt a flush of heat rise up her neck. Your girlfriend? Arthur turned back to her. The playfulness was gone from his face. It's the best cover, Elena. It explains why I hired you. It explains why you're always with me, and it gives us a reason to be on the dance floor close to him. And if it goes wrong, then we crash and burn, Arthur said softly. Together. Elena looked at him. For 5 years she had been alone, fighting alone, surviving alone. Now this man, this billionaire who had everything to lose, was willing to jump off a cliff with her. Okay, Elena said. Let's go to the ball. The Metropolitan Museum of Art was transformed. The Temple of Dendor was bathed in violet and gold light. 1,000 of the world's wealthiest people mingled, their laughter echoing against the ancient sandstone. Champagne flowed like water, and the air smelled of expensive perfume and secrets. A hush fell over the crowd as Arthur Sterling entered. He looked dashing in a black velvet tuxedo, but no one was looking at him. All eyes were on the woman on his arm. Elena wore a gown of liquid silver that clung to her silhouette like a second skin. It was backless, revealing the elegant curve of her spine. Her hair was swept to one side, exposing her neck. She wore a simple black domino mask, encrusted with small diamonds. The theme of the night was masquerade. It covered just enough of her face to obscure the immediate recognition, but left her striking hazel eyes visible. Steady, Arthur whispered, feeling her hand tremble slightly on his arm. You look magnificent. I feel like I'm walking into a lion's cage covered in steak sauce, Elena murmured, keeping a dazzling smile plastered on her face. Just follow my lead, and remember, you adore me. That part might be the hardest acting challenge of the night, she teased, though her pulse was racing. They moved through the crowd. Arthur introduced her simply as Elena, leaving her last name a mystery. The elites of New York were intrigued. Who was this mystery woman who had tamed the workaholic Arthur Sterling? From across the room, by the champagne tower, Marcus Thorne watched them. Thorne was a big man, broad-shouldered, with a shaved head and a beard that was carefully trimmed. He exuded an aura of menace. He held a crystal tumbler of whiskey in his hand. Well, well, Thorne said to his associate. Sterling has a new toy. Shall we greet them? The associate asked. Let them come to us. Thorne smiled coldly. Arthur steered Elena toward the bar, navigating the social currents with expert ease. They stopped a few feet from Thorne. Marcus, Arthur said, his voice smooth. Enjoying the night? Thorne turned. His eyes raked over Eleanor, lingering for a second too long. Eleanor felt a chill crawl down her spine, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. Sterling, Thorne grunted. I didn't think you had time for parties. I heard you were busy trying to figure out how to run a logistics company. Multitasking is a skill, Marcus, Arthur replied. Allow me to introduce Elena, my partner. Thorn extended a hand. His fingers were thick, adorned with a heavy gold signet ring. Charmed, Thorn said. Elena took his hand. Her skin was cool. Mr. Thorn, I've heard so much about you. All good, I hope. Thorn's eyes bore into hers behind her mask. You seem familiar, my dear. Have we met? Elena's heart stopped. She laughed, a light, airy sound. I don't think so. I would have remembered meeting a legend. Thorn didn't smile. He was studying her bone structure. The mask was helping, but was it enough? A drink, Marcus, Arthur interjected, signaling the bartender. A refill on that scotch? No, Thorn said, clutching his glass tighter. I nurse my drinks. Old habit. Never let a glass out of your hand. You never know who wants to poison you. Arthur and Eleanor exchanged a microscopic glance. The plan relied on him putting the glass down. Paranoia keeps you young, I suppose, Arthur quipped. Vigilance keeps me rich, Thorn corrected. The music swelled. A waltz. Dance with me, Thorn said abruptly, extending a hand to Eleanor. Arthur stiffened. I believe this dance is mine. Oh, surely you can share, Sterling, Thorn sneered. Unless you're afraid she'll like me better. Elena placed a calming hand on Arthur's chest. She could feel his heart hammering. She looked at Thorn. If she danced with him, she might be able to get close enough to swipe the glass if he set it on a nearby table, or perhaps use a different method. I'd be delighted, Mr. Thorn, Elena said. Arthur's eyes widened in warning, but Elena stepped away from him and took Thorn's hand. They moved to the dance floor. Thorn was a surprisingly graceful dancer for his size, but his grip was iron tight. So, Thorn said as he spun her, where did Arthur find you? Modeling agency? Or perhaps one of those escort services for the socially inept tech geniuses? He found me in a library, Elena lied smoothly. I was reading Machiavelli. He found it charming. Thorn laughed softly. Machiavelli, the prince. It is better to be feared than loved. Do you agree? I think it is better to be underestimated, Elena replied. Thorn stopped spinning. He pulled her close, uncomfortably close. You have a sharp tongue. And your voice, it reminds me of someone who caused me a great deal of trouble a few years ago. Elena stopped breathing. Everyone has a doppelganger, Mr. Thorn. Her name was Robert Fairchild's daughter, Thorn whispered in her ear. A smart girl. Too smart. I destroyed her father. And if she ever surfaced again, I'd destroy her too. He pulled back to look at her reaction. Elena didn't blink. She summoned every ounce of rage she had suppressed for 5 years and converted it into ice. Sounds like a tragic story, Elena said, bored. But I'm afraid I'm not interested in ghost stories, Marcus. I'm interested in the future. She reached up and adjusted his lapel, her fingers grazing his chest pocket. And by the way, your tie is crooked. Thorn blinked, surprised by her boldness. In that split second of distraction, as his hand instinctively went to his tie, he loosened his grip on his whiskey glass, resting it momentarily on the tray of a passing waiter who was squeezing through the dancers. Elena saw it. She didn't grab the glass. That was too obvious. Instead, as she adjusted his tie, her other hand, holding a small, specially treated adhesive pad Arthur had given her, brushed against the side of the glass sitting on the waiter's tray. It was a movement so fluid it looked like she was simply gesturing. She pressed. The pad captured the latent print from his thumb. She pulled back. There. Much better. Thorn stared at her, suspicious but unsure. May I cut in? Arthur appeared beside them. He didn't wait for permission. He took Elena's arm firmly and pulled her away from Thorn. "Did you get it?" Arthur whispered as he spun her into the crowd. "I got it," Elena breathed, her legs feeling like jelly. "Let's get out of here. He suspects. He knows something is wrong." "Walk," Arthur commanded. "Don't run. Walk." They made their way to the exit. Thorn watched them go. He reached for his glass on the waiter's tray. He took a sip. Then he paused. He looked at the side of the glass. There was a faint smudge, a slight distortion in the condensation where something had pressed against it. Thorn's eyes went black. He pulled out his phone. "Get security," Thorn growled. "Lock down the building. No one leaves." But he was too late. Arthur's limousine was already speeding down Fifth Avenue. Inside the car, Elena peeled the adhesive pad from her palm. On it was a perfect, dusty reproduction of Marcus Thorn's thumbprint. She looked at Arthur, adrenaline crashing through her system. She started to laugh, a hysterical, relieved sound. "We did it," she gasped. Arthur looked at her. Her hair was messy, her mask was off, and she looked beautiful. "You were incredible," Arthur said. He leaned in. The energy between them, built up over weeks of late nights and shared danger, finally snapped. He kissed her. It wasn't a tentative kiss. It was desperate, fueled by survival and triumph. Elena kissed him back, her hands tangling in his hair. For a moment, they weren't CEO and CSO. They weren't conspirators. They were just two people who had walked into the fire and come out unburned. Or so they thought. Sunday morning was a blur of triumph. They went straight to the secure server room in the basement of Sterling Tech. No one else was allowed in. Arthur scanned the lifted print into the biometric reader. Processing. Identity confirmed. M. Thorn. Access granted. "We got him," Arthur whispered. The file Project Acheron opened. It was all there. The emails, the bank transfers, the falsified ledgers. It proved definitively that Thorn had routed the stolen funds through a shell company in the Caymans and altered the metadata to frame Robert Fairchild. "This is it," Elena said, tears streaming down her face. "This is my father's freedom. Even in death, he'll be free." "I'll send this to the SEC and the FBI immediately," Arthur said. "We'll leak it to the press simultaneously so he can't bury it." Arthur initiated the download. Downloading. 10%, 20%. Suddenly, the screen flashed red. "Alert! Alert! Unauthorized exfiltration detected." "What?" Arthur frowned. "We have admin access." The red flashing intensified. A skull icon appeared on the screen. It wasn't a standard error message. Hydra protocol initiated. "Unplug it!" Arthur shouted. "Elena, pull the hard line!" Elena lunged for the server cables, ripping them from the wall. Sparks flew. The room went silent. "Did we stop it?" Elena asked, panting. Arthur looked at his phone. It was buzzing uncontrollably. He looked at the main wall of monitors that displayed the global status of Sterling Tech. One by one, the lights were turning red. London. Red. Tokyo. Red. San Francisco. Red. "No," Arthur whispered, horror dawning on his face. It wasn't just a lock, it was a trap. The file they had opened contained a logic bomb, a dormant virus designed to trigger if anyone other than Thorn accessed it, using his biometrics from an external IP. "What does it do?" Elena asked, fear gripping her throat. "It's eating us," Arthur said, typing frantically on a disconnected terminal. "It's wiping our proprietary code. It's deleting our customer databases. It's... Oh my God." "What?" "It's transferring our capital. It's draining the company accounts." Within 10 minutes, Sterling Tech was bleeding to death. The virus was designed to look like an inside job. It was using Arthur's credentials to authorize the transfers. The office doors banged open. Mike, the head of security, ran in, followed by 2 NYPD officers. "Arthur Sterling," one of the officers shouted. "Step away from the computer." "You don't understand," Arthur said, holding up his hands. "It's a virus. We're being attacked." "We have a warrant for your arrest, Mr. Sterling," the officer said, pulling out handcuffs. "For corporate embezzlement and grand larceny. We just received a tip that you were liquidating the company assets to flee the country." "That's a lie," Elena screamed. "It's Marcus Thorne. He planted a trap." The officer looked at Elena. "And you are?" "She's the accomplice," a voice came from the doorway. Sarah Jenkins stood there, looking smug. "I told you, Arthur. I told you she was poison. I tracked her login. She accessed the secure mainframe using a stolen biometric key. She set you up, Arthur." Arthur looked at Elena. The evidence looked damning. Elena had the physical copy of the print. Elena had urged him to open the file. Elena was the daughter of a convicted embezzler. "Arthur," Elena said, her voice shaking. "You know I didn't do this. You know." Arthur looked at the police, at the red screens, and then at Elena. His eyes were full of pain. He was being framed just like her father. But in this moment, chaos reigned. "Don't say anything, Elena," Arthur said quietly as the officer cuffed him. "Call my lawyer." "Arthur!" she cried as they dragged him out. "Take her too!" Sarah Jenkins shouted. "She's the mastermind." Elena didn't wait. Years of survival instinct kicked in. She knew that if she was arrested now, she would be killed in custody or buried in a hole forever. She needed to be free to fix this. As the second officer moved toward her, Elena grabbed a heavy fire extinguisher off the wall and sprayed it full in his face. White powder filled the room. "Hey!" Elena turned and ran. She sprinted through the server room, out the back service exit, and into the stairwell. She ran down 50 flights of stairs. Her lungs burned. Her legs screamed. She burst out into the alleyway behind the building, gasping for air. Sirens wailed in the distance. She was alone again. Arthur was gone. The evidence was corrupted. Sterling Tech was destroyed, and Marcus Thorne had won. She pulled her hood up and disappeared into the New York crowds. That night, it rained. Elena sat in a cheap internet cafe in the Bronx, watching the news. Billionaire Arthur Sterling arrested. Sterling Tech shares plummet to zero. Mystery woman sought for questioning. On the screen, Marcus Thorne was giving an interview. He looked grave, concerned. "It is a tragedy," Thorne was saying. "Arthur was a brilliant man, but greed corrupts. I will do what I can to buy the assets of Sterling Tech to save the jobs of the employees." He was going to buy Arthur's company for nothing. He was going to win everything. Elena stared at the screen. She felt a cold, hard resolve settle in her chest. She had tried to play by the rules. She had tried to use the law. The law had failed. She reached into her pocket. She still had the USB drive Arthur had given her, the one containing the encrypted Project Acheron file. The virus had corrupted the Sterling network, but the source file on this drive was still intact. It was just locked. She needed the key. She needed Thorne, but she couldn't steal his print again. He would be expecting that. She needed to go to the source. Elena stood up. She wasn't going to run. She was going to the one place Thorne would never expect her to go. She was going to his house, tonight. She picked up a pair of scissors from the desk of the cafe manager when he wasn't looking. She went to the bathroom. She looked at herself in the mirror. The long, beautiful hair, Arthur's favorite feature, was a liability. It was recognizable. She took the scissors and hacked it off. Clumps of chestnut hair fell into the dirty sink. When she was done, she had a jagged, short pixie cut. She looked harder, older. No more translators, she whispered to her reflection. No more hiding. She walked out into the rain, heading toward the darkest part of the city to find the one man who could help her break into a fortress, her father's old cellmate. 3 days later, Marcus Thorne hosted a merger celebration at his sprawling Hamptons estate. It was a coronation. With Arthur Sterling jailed and his assets frozen, Thorne was selling the pieces of the empire to the highest bidders. The guest of honor was Chairman Wei. Thorne needed Wei's blessing to finalize his monopoly. Security was tighter than a fortress, but Thorne had made one fatal error. He hired Lorizon to cater the event. He checked the guest list, but he didn't check the temp dishwasher with jagged, short black hair and thick-rimmed glasses. Eleanor Fairchild kept her head down, carrying a water pitcher into the grand hall. Thorne sat at the head of the mahogany table, beaming. To the future, he toasted. Chairman Wei didn't drink. He looked bored. He spoke a sharp sentence in Mandarin to his assistant. Thorne's young, terrified translator stammered. The chairman. He asks about the rumors of a hidden file. He asks about Project Acheron. Thorne's smile faltered. Tell him it's a myth. Sterling is a criminal. The company is clean. Elena stepped forward to pour water for a guest. She didn't pour. She set the heavy crystal pitcher down with a loud thud. The myth is real, Marcus, she said. The room went deathly silent. Thorne stared at the server. It took a moment for him to recognize the woman from the gala beneath the disguise. Security, Thorne screamed. She's a fugitive. Sit down, Chairman Wei commanded in English. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of an emperor. Thorne froze. Elena took off her glasses and threw them on the table. She looked directly at Chairman Wei. Chairman, Elena spoke in flawless, formal Mandarin. You once told me a wise tiger listens for the heartbeat of the earth. This man is a parasite. He framed Arthur Sterling, just as he framed my father, Robert Fairchild, 5 years ago. Wei looked at her, a slow spark of recognition lighting his eyes. The waitress, he murmured, the one who understands the wind. Eleanor pulled the USB drive from her pocket and held it up. This drive contains the ledger of Project Acheron. It proves everything, but it is encrypted with a biometric key. Yours, Marcus. I won't be bullied by a waitress, Thorne sputtered. Open it, Wei cut in, his face like stone. Or the deal is dead. If you refuse, I will short your stock and bury you by morning. Thorne looked at the hungry eyes of the elite guests. He was trapped. Arrogant to the end, he figured he could open the file and delete the evidence before anyone saw it. Fine, Thorne spat. Bring me a laptop. He jammed the drive in. The screen behind him lit up. Biometric scan required. Thorne slammed his thumb onto the reader. Access granted. Thorne's hand hovered over the delete key. See? Nothing. Don't touch it, Elena shouted. But she didn't need to shout. Arthur hadn't written a code to destroy. He had written a code to reveal. The file wasn't a spreadsheet. It was a broadcast. On the giant screen, a security video from 5 years ago began to play. It showed Marcus Thorne stacking cash into a briefcase. The audio was crisp. Move the funds to the Cayman account. Change the metadata to Fairchild's login. The old fool won't know what hit him. The room gasped. The video wasn't just on the screen. The Hydra protocol was broadcasting it to every newsfeed subscribed to the Sterling ticker. No, Thorne screamed, clawing at the laptop. It's a deep fake, he snapped. Thorne grabbed a steak knife from the table and lunged at Eleanor. Eleanor didn't flinch. She didn't have to. Wei's bodyguard moved with impossible speed, catching Thorne's wrist and pinning him to the table with a sickening crunch. Wei stood over him. You have no honor, he said. The aftermath. The FBI raided the estate within the hour. Thorne was arrested screaming, his confession playing on every channel in America. The charges against Arthur were dropped immediately. The stolen funds were found safely secured in an escrow account Arthur's code had created to protect them. Arthur was released at sunrise. He didn't go home. He went to L'Horizon. The restaurant was closed. Elena was sitting at their usual table, wearing old jeans, looking exhausted but peaceful. Arthur sat down across from her. He placed a document on the table. "What is this?" Elena asked. "A partnership agreement," Arthur said softly. 50-50. Sterling and Fairchild Technologies. I'm not offering you a job, Elena. I'm offering you half the empire. You saved it. It's yours. Elena stared at him, tears welling up. "Arthur." "Besides," he smiled, taking her hand. "Chairman Wei called. He refuses to do business unless the tiger is in the room." Elena laughed, a sound of pure relief after 5 years of silence. "I suppose someone has to keep you out of trouble." "Is that a yes?" Elena stood up, walked around the table and kissed him. "That," she whispered, "is a deal." What a ride. From a silenced waitress to the co-owner of a billion-dollar empire, Elena proved that the most dangerous person in the room is often the one nobody notices. Marcus Thorne learned the hard way that you can't outrun the truth, especially when it's spoken in a language you didn't bother to learn. If you enjoyed this story of revenge, justice, and high-stakes romance, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want more stories like this, hit subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a upload. What was your favorite moment? Was it the scene at the Met Gala or the final takedown at the dinner party? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.